Immediately stakes a claim in the center, preparing for rapid piece development and challenging black's response for central influence. Immediately contesting the center establishes a foundational structure for equality and initiates a positional struggle for central dominion. Challenging black's central dominance, white immediately stakes a claim on the queen side and opens lines for active piece play. Solidifying the center and preparing for the queen side expansion, this move gracefully accepts the challenge. Developing the knight aims to solidify central control and prepare for castling, a sensible preparatory step in this queen's gambit declined setup. Developing knights early, black prepares to castle and challenges white's central pawn. Reinforcing the d4 pawn and preparing to contest the center further solidifies white's central presence. Abandoning the center for a pawn, a risky gambit inviting queenside expansion. Challenging black's central pawn structure, white aggressively seeks to gain space and disrupt the queen's pawn. Unleashing the bishop to f5 now puts it on an active diagonal, potentially pressuring white's queenside development and creating early tactical possibilities. Solidifying the center and preparing to develop the kingside bishop opens lines for queenside expansion. Solidifying the pawn chain opens lines for the dark-squared bishop and prepares to challenge the center. Capturing the pawn solidifies control of the center and prepares for central pawn pushes. Developing the bishop to b4 pins the knight and pressures white's queenside structure, aiming to disrupt white's coordination. Securing the monarch allows white to focus on the central tension and potential outpost squares. Reinforcing the central pawn and preparing for further pawn advances, this knight skillfully eyes the kingside. Straining the knight outward now, white invites a potential king's side skirmish, potentially sacrificing pawn structure for attacking chances. Castling secures the monarch and prepares for central pawn pushes. Fortifying the kingside pawn structure, this move aims to shield the monarch and prevent any immediate central breakthroughs, though it does slightly restrict the g2 bishop's diagonal. Re-establishing the bishop's defensive presence on the long diagonal, this knight maneuver might be preparing a subtle regrouping. Seizing central real estate aggressively, white liberates the bishop and aims for an immediate initiative. Boldly challenging the center, this move ignites a tactical skirmish and claims crucial central space. Capturing the knight on g6 immediately creates a pawn majority in the center, aiming for central pawn breaks later. Opening the kingside file, you immediately challenge white's central pawn structure. Reinforcing the central pawn structure, this brings the bishop actively into play. Unlocking the queenside, this maneuver aims to coordinate pieces for a central pawn thrust, potentially creating dynamic play. Preparing to join the fight on the kingside, the queen seeks a better vantage point and aims to connect the rooks. Opening the e-file grants an unexpected pathway for your rook, aiming to exploit the slightly exposed black king. Centralizing the bishop after the exchange enhances control and prepares for further pawn advances, aiming to seize the initiative. A daring regrouping, sacrificing a pawn to open crucial diagonals for the queen and bishops while creating a pass d-pawn. Sacrificing a bishop to force an exchange simplifies, opening lines for your rook and potentially creating a vulnerable pawn structure for black. Unleashing the queen's power, this captures material and forces a reckoning on the open c-file, creating immediate tactical sharpness. A necessary maneuver to address the queen's threat and secure the king's safety on the semi-open g-file. Aggressively pushing the g-pawn might create weaknesses around your king, potentially opening lines for enemy attacks. Sharpening the kingside pawn structure aims to deny black's pieces crucial squares. Unlocking the d-file with the rook offers immediate pressure and improved coordination, aiming to disrupt white's pawn structure. Fortifying the queenside, this piece reassures the monarch's protection while eyeing potential breaks. Reclaiming the initiative on the central files, by repositioning this rook solidifies black's control and prepares for future pawn advances. Reclaiming the central file provides white crucial open lines for piece activity and pressure. a subtle repositioning, aiming to contest the central files and potentially launch an attack on the king side. Unlocking the d-file for a rook exchange promises to intensify pressure on black's slightly exposed king. Reclaiming the open file is essential, setting up a potential rook battery. Piercing the knight's defense, this pawn advances to disrupt black's pawn structure and seize central space. Reclaiming central influence, the knight establishes a vital outpost, preparing for potential pawn advances or knightly maneuvers across the board. Breaking the pawn structure, white targets black's isolated kingside pawns and opens lines for his rooks. Reclaiming central space with the pawn solidifies the pawn chain and prepares for potential pawn pushes. Reclaiming the central files, this queen repositioning aims to exert pressure and prepare for pawn breakthroughs. Re-establishing the knight on a central outpost offers a vital outpost and potential breakthrough material. Unleashing a pawn storm aims to create immediate attacking chances by disrupting black's well-placed knight and opening lines towards the king. Sacrificing the pawn opens diagonals and may create tactical opportunities against white's slightly exposed king. Opening the g-file dramatically intensifies pressure on black's kingside, creating immediate attacking potential. Grasping the open files for queenside expansion, this repositioning eyes the weakened light squares. Pushing the f-pawn creates immediate attacking potential, aiming to shatter black's pawn structure and expose the king. This bold pawn thrust ignites a dynamic struggle for central control, potentially opening lines for your knights. A bold attempt to exploit the weakened kingside pawn structure, directly challenging black's defense. Seeking central pawn breakthroughs, this maneuver aims to activate the rook and pressure white's slightly compromised structure, potentially opening lines for counterplay. Initiating a dangerous kingside pawn storm to dismantle the black king's defenses. Challenging white's attacking pawn chain by creating counterplay, though it does weaken the kingside further. Exploiting the open kingside, this pawn sacrifice aims to shatter black's pawn shield and expose the king. Cleverly injecting the knight into the fray creates a powerful mating net around white's exposed king. Unleashing a decisive sacrifice, this captures the opponent's attention and aims to shatter their defensive structure. Sacrificing the rook to disrupt white's pawn chain offers a glimmer of counterplay. Decisive breakthrough. The black king's sanctuary is irrevocably breached, forcing a swift surrender of material or position. Sacrificing the rook to expose the king opens a direct assault, demanding careful king repositioning. Sacrificing the bishop here is a desperate attempt to lure the black king into a mating net, but it likely falls short given black's solid defense. A desperate, glittering gambit opens lines toward the enemy king's exposed squares. The king scrambles to safety, seeking refuge from the oncoming storm of potential checks. Chasing the queen again, but the knight's sacrifice is overlooked, opening lines to the beleaguered king. Initiating a forced exchange of queens to simplify into a winning endgame, thanks to the exposed black king. The rook now squarely occupies the open file, a crucial positional asset in this simplified material scenario. Securing the pawns with the king now allows white to consolidate their material advantage and prepare for a simpler endgame. Sacrificing the rook opens lines for the pawns, presenting a surprising endgame challenge. Reinforcing the bishop and preparing to challenge the passed pawn offers a glimmer of counterplay in this difficult endgame. The rook's repositioning to the open file immediately activates it, challenging the queen and preparing for potential pawn races. Repositioning the rook to the fourth rank aims to contest the open file and potentially create threats against black's king, once passed pawns materialize.